All right, there we go. So with introductions out of the way, this is C3, Supporting Student Success, Compassion, Communication, and Connection. And we want to start off with a little activity. So I see there's 3 people here, so we can just kind of talk about it in here. But we're thinking about times where maybe you wanted to make a change in your life, or someone reacted to it, or they told you how to change. So we're wondering, what was that experience like for you? 1, telling someone you wanted to change, and 2, getting that advice back. What did that feel like with someone telling you how to change? You can feel free to type in chat too. We're looking at that as well. I know for me personally, whenever, I'm thinking about making a change and I'm thinking about it and someone tells me what to do. I know, Jenna, you're kind of the same way with this. Someone tells me what to do, I don't want to do it anymore. That's probably why I have house projects that are going on 6 months, 7 months, or so on and so forth, right? Okay, if I ask for someone, it was fine. I ask people for advice when I think they have something important to tell me. Sure, yeah, we're opening ourselves up to change. Absolutely, and that's definitely okay. We want to make sure that when we're giving advice, that it's welcome. Absolutely. It definitely feels bad when someone just kind of tells you to change.
I feel if you're kind of talking too about a behavior that you might want to change and someone says, oh, well, why don't you just do this? It can also kind of feel like, well, you don't understand. Like, you don't understand like what I might have tried, what the other factors are that are affecting this, something like that.
Kind of like the teenager parent interaction where, teenager thinks the parents don't understand what it's like. Happens all the time. So great. So we're going to move on to a little video here about motivational interviewing. Sound should be shared, so let me know if you can't hear it. Otherwise, here we go.
It can be quite a burden to feel like you have to make change happen. Motivational interviewing is about helping people talk themselves into changing. And I definitely need the person's active involvement and brilliance and ideas for that to change.
Really, the idea of motivation isn't something that comes from us, and it isn't something we create in clients. It's something that's already in them. And the interviewer's job is really to evoke from them that motivation.
If you adopt a less persuasive style and a more evocative, softer style with people, outcomes are better. Instead of trying to persuade this person to change, you come alongside them, agree about what change you're talking about, and get them to say why and how they might change rather than you do it.
One of the things that Steve Rolnick helped me to realize was how normal ambivalence is when you're looking at a change. And to simultaneously want and not want something is perfectly normal.
The good news for us is that it's often the case that when people are struggling to change a difficult behavior, that's when they become ambivalent. So that's where motivational interviewing is most useful.
So if somebody is feeling ambivalent and the question of change arises, it's very important that they feel a sense of freedom and comfort to examine this and make a decision for themselves.
This is where you'll see the emphasis on change talk in MI and exploring a person's own values and their own goals as a way of bringing forward change talk.
What is interesting is that there are things that you can do as a practitioner or a counselor that either evokes change talk or not. And that's the beauty of MI, is that it provides a framework for you evoking the change talk, which we know produces the better outcome.
So I think Zach is still on mute, but the general question is—
It's been a long day.
what your kind of takeaways were, or what you might have gotten from this video about the overview of motivational interviewing.
I know for me personally, the thing that stands out a lot is that, motivation comes from within. And so it makes it sound like, everyone has it within them, but they have to be willing to commit to it. And you can want something and not want it at the same time. I would love to work out 5 days out of the week. I don't want to. And it's perfectly natural. It's totally human of us.
Having that ambivalence is a really natural part of making behavior change, considering behavior change, and why we don't make behavior changes some of the time.
Absolutely. And so with how we communicate with students, because both Jen and I work with students as well, how it changes is we may ask more different types of questions or look for different things in conversations to have the student open up and talk about this. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But when we're having those conversations, we often take a lot more from authority figures, right? We take more influence from those. And sometimes that can be hard to overcome, right? And so the interviewer's role in all this, we're not the expert on the category. We're not the authority teacher, therapist. I am in no means an expert on how to stop smoking. If someone came to me and wanted to change that, right? But what I can be for that person is I can be a mirror, I can be a collaborator, and I can be a facilitator. I can be someone that they talk to, and I can reflect what they're saying back to them and have, just be listening to them without giving any suggestions. I can be a collaborator and help them find ways to change. And I can sometimes facilitate with the resources that I know we have here at Arizona State to help them change and to find them where to go. So very big, important things here. The most important thing here to remember is everyone has their own sphere of control, and everyone is free to do what they want. So even if we're concerned about someone and we may want to influence them to change a certain way, we don't have control over what they do. Of course, when it comes to, legal activity or harm of self or others, this is illegal, this is something that needs to be reported, of course, right? This is something that doesn't remain a sphere of control. We have to take action at that point. But for other changes, whether it be for health of like working out, eating better, stop smoking or vaping, we have to understand that this is outside of our control, no matter how much we want to be in control of the situation.
The stages of change are really important to consider when you're thinking about how you can help a student who might want to change a behavior, or who, despite what you may want for them, might not really want to change a behavior. So we use this model to help us determine a student's level of readiness in regards to changing a behavior. These are listed in order of kind of how they go, but it's really important to remember that it's not always a linear process. This process can be fluid. If you look towards the bottom of the chart, you'll see that one of the stages of change, what's considered a normal part of the stages of change, is relapse, when a person is no longer engaging in the healthy behavior they want to be engaging in, or they've reverted to an old behavior that they didn't want to be engaging in anymore. This process is fluid. People can go back and forth between the different stages, but it's helpful to assess where someone might be at when we think about how we want to talk to them about their behavior change. So the pre-contemplation phase is the phase where a person is not really thinking about making a behavior change. In contemplation, an individual might be thinking about making a change, but they can see a lot of reasons why it might not work. So they might say, it'd be good to stop smoking, or I know that smoking is unhealthy, but I like it really helps me with stress, helps me socialize. So they're seeing a lot of reasons why they might not be ready to make a change. In the preparation phase, a person sees the reason for a decision or a change and kind of starts to decide to make that change. They prepare themselves to make that change because they see the reason to do so. In the action phase, the individual truly sees what needs to be done and starts to do the things to make it happen. So maybe they stop buying cigarettes, they stop going to the places where they used to smoke, they stop going to the types of parties where they feel tempted to overindulge in alcohol, things like that. They're taking the steps that they need to do to change the behavior that they want to change. In the maintenance phase, individuals are continuing to do the behaviors that they want to be doing or to avoid the behaviors that they want to avoid. So they're maintaining those actions that they had decided to take. Relapse, again, can be a normal part of the stages of change. And this is where an individual reverts back to some of the less healthy behaviors or stops doing some of their healthier behaviors. So on the right side of this little diagram, we can see kind of some of the common phrases that people might use to describe where they're at in this phase of change. And we can also start to see a little bit of what we will refer to as change talk. We'll talk more about change talk, but this is the kind of phrases and words that we hear as an indicator that someone is starting to develop a readiness to change a behavior. And this is really key when we're talking to individuals about behavior change, about their health habits, everything like that. So when you look at these stages, how do you think that someone might respond to receiving advice when they're in the pre-contemplation or contemplation stage of change? So like Patricia mentioned, they might not be open to listening to advice. I think that's so true. If you're just minding your own business, going about what you're doing, and someone says, hey, don't you know smoking's unhealthy for you? It can be really unpleasant to hear that when you are not considering making a change or you're not open to making a change at that time. And so especially when you talk about like openness to listening to advice, openness to talking about changing in behavior, it's really important that you have a sense for where someone is at in their stage of change, because that can really determine how successful your conversation, your coaching, your motivational interviewing with that person might be in helping them discover a change that they want to make and feel equipped to make. So motivational interviewing, which the C3 training is based upon, is comprised of 4 main principles. And all of these principles have their own role in how we can effectively do the motivational interviewing process to affect behavior change in our students. Empathy is really important. Zach will show a video later on that talks more about empathy and kind of shows what this might look like. But this involves seeing the world through your students' eyes, trying to think about things how your student thinks about them instead of putting so much of our own impressions or ideas behind them, trying to share in the students' experiences. Expression of empathy is really important to the motivational interviewing approach. When students feel that they are understood, like all of us, they are more able to open up to their own experiences and to share those experiences with others. Developing a discrepancy is one of the key components for a great reason. So in a book about motivational interviewing, there's this quote: motivation for change occurs when people perceive a discrepancy between where they are and where they want to be. So if you are not thinking about how your behaviors might affect the outcomes or the goals that you're working towards, it can be difficult to want to make that change. But when you start to recognize a discrepancy between what you're doing and how it might be getting you further away or not moving you closer towards the goals that you have for yourself or your life, you can start to see how you might feel more ready to change those behaviors. So in the motivational interviewing role, our goal is to work to develop this situation, this discrepancy, through helping students to examine the discrepancies between their current behavior and their future goals. When students perceive that their current behaviors are not leading toward their important future goals, they might become more motivated to make life changes, behavior changes, whatever they need to do to address that. Exploring ambivalence is another key aspect. So in some writings about motivational interviewing, you may read this as being described as exploring resistance or things like that. But ambivalence is a really great term for when you kind of see like the benefits of changing behavior, but you also kind of see some reasons to maybe not change the behavior, or you see some barriers about changing the behavior and things like that. It's really important that we don't fight a student's resistance, but kind of try to roll with it. Statements demonstrating ambivalence should not be challenged. We can use the student's own momentum in exploring that ambivalence to further explore how they're feeling, what they're considering, and what actions they might take. When we're using this approach, ambivalence can actually be decreased rather than increased, as students are not reinforced for playing devil's advocate or really like digging into their position or thinking like, oh, like, I don't want to get into this. I don't want you to tell me what to do. The student can kind of walk themselves through that ambivalence in that process. Supporting self-efficacy is really important. Self-efficacy is situation-specific self-confidence. As students are held responsible for choosing and carrying out actions to change, like Zach mentioned, this is that sphere of influence. Like, the student is the only one who can change their behavior. I can think of several situations in which, you know, if I'm thinking about my own perspective and my own values or things like that, there are things that I want students to do differently. There are things that I wish they would do that I wish they would not do, but ultimately it's not my decision, and it's not about my goals or my values. It's about that individuals and their own sphere of influence. So our role is to focus their efforts on helping them to stay motivated and supporting their sense of self-efficacy and making behavior changes and working towards their goals. There is not necessarily a right way to change across the board, but there might be a right way for an individual person or in an individual situation. So we want to help our students develop the confidence that they can make a change if they decide that they want to make it, or they can move in a direction towards a goal if that's something that they decide that they want to do. We want to support them in that self-efficacy.
Yes, absolutely. So we're gonna, like Jenna mentioned, we have another video here. If you've seen the movie Inside Out and you like the movie, great. You'll probably love this. If you've never seen it, here it is. And if you don't like it, well, it's not that long, so don't worry.
My rocket! Wait, Riley and I were still using that rocket. It still has some song power left. Who's your friend who likes to play? No, you can't take my rocket to the top. Riley and I are going to the moon. Riley can't be done with me.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone. Forever.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
Sorry.
It's all I had left of Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time. We had breakfast twice that day.
Sadness.
It sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends.
Yeah, it's sad.
I'm okay now. Come on, the train station is this way.
Okay, so a little clip there about showing some empathy. What are some of the thoughts about the video? What did we see? What do we know about Joy's response compared to Sadness's response to Bing Bong's problem? You know, what were some of the examples of empathy we saw?
I know whenever I'm upset about something, I just want a person to tell me, oh, that sucks, and not try to fix my problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Cynthia, sadness acknowledged that there was a reason to feel sad. Absolutely. We want our feelings to feel justified, right? We want to feel, you know, we don't want to feel like we're going crazy or insane or we're totally out of, you know, left field, right? We want to feel justified in what we're feeling in that moment. And so sometimes we do just need to listen to students. And so we're going to talk about with empathy here. And empathy is a huge part of this. There's lots of different types. There's a couple different types of empathy, but all in all, it's using effective listening and collaborative communication. You know, if we can't help someone if we don't know the problem, if we do not identify the issue or identify what they're talking about, we can't help. And just like empathic responses, we need empathic actions, because we know, or a lot of people say, we hear it all the time, that actions speak louder than words. So we need to pair the two to make it really effective. Providing empathic responses, you need to use reflective statements to gain understanding. So just to clarify, it's one of the things like, all right, so let me see if I have this straight, right? I'm sure many of us have said that in the past in a conversation, or, I hear what you're saying, or, oh, this is, so you're saying, sometimes, so some of those phrases are, I hear you, I see you, I will support you, and I'm so glad you told me, I'm here if you need to talk. Which is something I had to learn. Being from the Midwest, my default setting is, you're fine, I'm fine. I say fine so much that my partner knows when I'm about to say it and makes fun of me for it ahead of time. But it's something I've had to learn to, that's not exactly an empathic response. It's more of Joy's responses of like, hey, it's going to be okay. Let's do this. Let's forget about it. Let's put a Band-Aid over it and just forget about it. Some of the actions we can take are maybe just sitting with a person, just being in someone's company, setting aside time to listen, even if you're busy. I know for me right now, this is probably hour 5 or 6 today of meetings, right? But taking 5 minutes between meetings that I may have for myself to just listen to someone can mean the world to them. And having open body language, making sure people know that they can approach you and you are approachable to talk if they need to. This may look different now. We live in different times with COVID. There's many more people in isolation. And even virtually, we just you may be the only person that person's in contact with that you need to reach out to. We had someone in an earlier session mention that how they deal with students who communicate with American Sign Language, and they may be living at home with someone who doesn't use American Sign Language or know it. So they have, not only are they alone at home with very limited socializing with people, but now they're alone with people that they can't effectively communicate with all the time. And that can be really tough for some of our students. So in our roles, how can we still show empathy in a COVID environment?
Hey, I jumped in a bit late, sorry. But I know with my student workers, making an effort to asking them how their week has been going, listen to them, especially weekends, like how was your weekend, and see how I can continue to support them. So ask them, what do you need from me so I can support you? And always having that be the last thing we talk about. That way it can build off to a bigger topic if necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. That is great to let your students know that anything you need, like how can I help you? Because for a lot of us as advisors or whatever role we play here, that we're also learning how to support students in this time. We've never been through this before, this kind of situation. So that open communication and collaborative, communication really helps us learn what we can do. So I really appreciate you sharing that. But there are a lot of signs of distress we have to look out for. And so we use the acronym CARES for this. Changes, academics, relationships, emotions, and social. So, changes, someone's out of character, right? Someone's got this super bubbly, happy, super energized personality all the time, and they come in totally down, kind of flat, right? We may know something's up. Something might be going on there. Their visible changes in maybe hygiene or their appearance, right? Some signs of depression are you to stop taking care of hygiene and stuff, like you can't find the energy for that. So that's a definite sign too. Academics, we work at a university with academics, right? So negative self-talk about school. If you ever heard of self-fulfilling prophecies, right? If you talk negative and all your thoughts are negative, your result will probably be negative. You're going to fulfill whatever you think of yourself. And so, especially now with online classes, right? That's a whole new world for some students that they may have never gone for, especially our first year students coming in. So they may even have more academic struggles than initially perceived or that we originally think of. In relationships, which again look different because the era we're in, right? People can feel disconnected. There could be abusive language and reactions, risky sexual behavior, lack of interest in certain things. Emotions, there could be erratic behavior, something that's kind of unexpected. Some crying, anxiety, depression, and finally social. And the first one there is, isolation. which is the term we use for students who have come in contact with the virus. They have to go into isolation. And so right there off the bat, that's a sign of distress that could cause more just because of the current situation we're in. They may change the way they participate, which we all are, but we could take it a step further and see how they're interacting in a social environment. Difficulty maintaining employment. So this by far is not an exhaustive list of all the signs of distress. There could still be more. I think the best thing to know about this list is that when you're dealing with students, you're probably going to know your students best compared to someone else. And so if you have continued interactions with them, you're going to notice these changes, and you're eventually going to have to trust your gut instinct, right? So out of all these signs or any other signs you may think of, which ones do you think you'll see the most in your role here at ASU as you're working with students, and how have you handled some of these in the past?
I'll jump in again.
Yeah, sure.
I've been on the opposite end of this, actually. When I was an undergrad, during my last semester, I decided to do like a major last minute career shift. It's going to be a teacher. I was like, no, wasn't a fan of it, and decided to work in higher ed instead. So my supervisor at the time noticed, okay, this is a big transition. You've been working towards this goal for like 5 years or so. So she noticed that some changes were happening and made the effort to reach out and connect me to services that I needed. And it was incredibly helpful. So I've been on the opposite end. It is definitely such a great thing to feel that support.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing. Absolutely. Having that person that reaches out when you're a student who may not even know the resources. I know when I was a student, I didn't know all the resources at all. I only knew my little bubble of what I interacted with. So yeah, super helpful. Would anyone else like to share?
I had a student once that I noticed wasn't eating much. So then I just started asking them, hey, do you want to do lunch meetings with me to just check in? So then they were kind of like, I at least knew that they were eating a meal once a week, but like, that's not enough, but still I get, at least like got them kind of started and back into it like for one day. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Absolutely. That's a great small way to share. Jenna probably knows more about it, so I'll let her speak on it.
It gives your student a chance to feel like seen too, you know, even if that one meal a week isn't making the entire difference in their physical health, that student can then recognize like someone at ASU cares about me and noticed a change in me and wanted to help. I think that goes a long way.
Great. So of course, every great presentation needs more videos. So we got one more quick little clip here, about 2 minutes, talking about the 4 processes of motivational interviewing.
There are 4 basic processes in motivational interviewing. The first is engaging, and this is where the emphasis is on building an alliance and a working relationship with your client. The first process in motivational interviewing is the foundation. Nothing else can happen until engaging is present. The second process is focusing. This is where you and your client come to a shared idea about what is the main focus of the time that you'll be spending together. You can spend a lot of time talking about one problem or concern or behavior after another, or even a desired change one after the other, and never really make progress moving towards any of them unless you eventually come to a shared focus. The third process is evoking. And this is where you as the interviewer will be taking a special emphasis on bringing out the client's own arguments for change, their own hopes for themselves, their own values, their own goals for the future. When clients hear themselves offer the reasons for change, they're more likely to believe what they hear, particularly if they are ambivalent. And fourth, finally, we have planning. Planning is that process that occurs when the client is willing to envision an important change and how exactly they might go about making it. The important thing to remember is that in the planning process, we're going to carry through the spirit of motivational interviewing in that planning, so that really the client's autonomy is supported, and it's a collaborative, power-sharing interaction that happens when the planning is done, as opposed to an expert-driven process that you might find in some other kinds of treatment approaches.
Okay, so another video debrief. What are some of the takeaways we had in this video? And sorry, we'll get to this formula and practice later on. We have some slides on that, but what were the main takeaways for this, or what stood out to us? I know for me, something that I need to really focus on, ironically, is the focus one, because, you know, a student can come to us with a multitude of problems. You know, I think a lot of us have been there, and students have a lot of different things, a lot of different balls in the air, right? And so they can come to us with a lot of different problems, and sometimes it can be hard to get them to focus, and even ourselves to focus on one issue within all of that that could really help. That's a tough part of this.
I think the importance too on including the motivational interviewing approach in the planning is also so key, because I feel like I have the tendency to say, like, okay, so get to bed early tonight, call your mom, you know, whatever you think might help the student. Once, you know, you feel like you can go through this process with listening and evoking and having your student guide you. But I think in the planning, for me, it's really easy to say, like, okay, so this is what you're going to do, but you want to let the motivational interviewing process and the student's own goals continue to guide through that phase too.
So with motivational interviewing, a good thing to remember is ORS. When we're listening for change talk, we can use ORS. Oh, Jenna just put a link also in the chat. It has a link to a Google Doc that has ORS on it, which is great. A little bit of a guide of what language to use, but we use ORS to dig a little bit deeper. We have 4 of them. It's open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And so open-ended questions, we want to get the student to talk. In the video, we saw that we want the student, the person we're talking to share, you know, talk through their arguments for change and everything like that. Open-ended questions is how we get there. It's about 60 to 70% open-ended questions in a conversation a lot of time, but we want to get the person talking. We want them to talk this out and get it all out there. So we not only can we better understand it, but they can kind of hear what they're saying. We have more to reflect back to them as the mirror. Affirmations, we want to build up their self-efficacy. We want to build up that confidence in them and affirm that they're doing the right thing. We want them to feel justified in what they're feeling or justified in their actions. You know, thank you for sharing, or you took a positive step by coming to talk to me. Someone comes in worried that, you know, well, I have to do academics, but I want to hang out with friends, and I want personal time and all this, and my grades are suffering. And you can tell them just simply like, okay, I can see that you're a dedicated student and you want to succeed. Right there, that's an affirmation that says, yeah, I do, you're right. And then you can start figuring out what they need to do. Maybe they just need to work on their time management a little bit, but we'll get them there. Reflections are designed to help students hear what they are saying. This is that mirror role, right? You know, I hear you saying, it sounds like, you know, it sounds like you just got a lot going on right now. You know, I get that fear of missing out is a real thing, but sometimes we may just need to take stuff for ourselves. Can be part of the conversation later on in the summary. But this can help to develop the discrepancies between the change that is, you know, they want to make and the ambivalence that is there that's stopping them from meeting their goals. It can also help, reflection can also help to strengthen their confidence in their abilities. And then finally, we come to summaries. This is really, you know, you can lead a horse to water, can't make it drink. You know, we're here to help students come to conclusions from what they've experienced. It also ensures that what you hear from the student is accurate, because accuracy is important here. We don't want to just have spent the last 20 minutes talking, and we got the totally wrong thing from the conversation that they're trying to solve, and now there's a disconnect, and they may never trust us with stuff like that again. And as Jenna noted earlier, if a student sounds like they don't want to fix the problem or find solutions to the barriers, summarize what they said without a reaction or judgment, but it's not time to give them that advice yet. They're not ready for it. And it's going to be a bad reaction. We're going to see some ambivalence there. But let them know you'll be there for them if they want to talk more about this. Of course, when you need to report any illegal activity, or if there's an intent to harm or their self or others, right? That is part of mandatory reporting, and that needs to be reported and all that.
So I touched on this in the 4 principles of motivational interviewing, but change talk is how you can start to listen for your students to be ready to make a behavior change. So it can basically be broken down into 4 different areas or types of change talk: desire, ability, reason, and need. So when we listen for phrases that fit into these categories and focus on the area of change indicated based on the language the student is using, that can help us to dig deeper to start moving the student toward an action step. So although you might not use this in every single conversation with a student, listening for change talk can help you begin to see if an individual is looking to make a change that you could potentially help to support them through. Phrases that evoke desire might sound something like, "I'd really like to get more sleep," or when an individual notes that a behavior change is something they wish to achieve. Phrases that evoke ability are those that show the student feels that they are capable of taking the specific action steps needed to make a change. So I can focus every day on my studies and coursework. Well, I can make time for friends, but it will take a balance of maybe spending less time on social media and things like that. So you're hearing that ability that the student recognizes their ability. Also listen carefully for phrases that evoke reason or need. So with these types of phrases, students name specific reasons or things that they feel really make them need to make a change. I know I can do better on tests if I played less video games, so the reason would be to do better on tests. I need to learn this information in my courses. This really is a type of change talk that we can then start to work with. Eventually, the goal is to help guide the student towards commitment, activation, and taking steps. So when you're in the commitment phase, activation phase, steps taking phase, all of these fall under the preparation, action, and then maintenance stages of the stage of change model. So this can help us to move them along those stages of change a little bit, or help them really to guide themselves along the stages of change a little bit. So when we hear a student say a phrase that sounds like change talk, then we can start to move toward action by digging a little bit deeper into what they're telling us, what they want, what they see as barriers, just by starting with that little kernel of what the student is telling us. So when you do start to hear this change talk with your students, try focusing on the area of change indicated by the language. So your student might say something like, "I feel like if I spent less time on social media, I could do better in my classes." You might not want to say, "Well, you should really play fewer video games," or things like that. You want to focus on kind of the area of change that your student has identified as being their desire to change, and then also the area that they're feeling ready to change. Reflect the change talk so that they can hear it. This goes back to the ORBS skills. This reflection phrase is so important. So 1, it helps to ensure that your student feels heard, and 2, it helps to ensure that you did hear and understand the student correctly. So you might say, I'm hearing you say that it sounds like you might like to spend less time on social media so that you could perform better in school or have less stress or whatever that is. That gives the student an opportunity to clarify or to solidify their position. Support the change talk by moving it to action. Dig a little deeper. What do you think that might look like for you? What would it take to get you to feel a little bit more confident in doing that? How do you think it could be easier for you to spend a little bit more time studying? Do you think having a different place to study might help? And if so, what might that look like? So that they're starting to develop a plan and a vision for what action might look like. Finally, you can provide connections. Connecting that student with resources on ASU or in the community that can help to support them in making that behavior change. Providing them with resources, information, and other sources of support that can help to confirm that student's decision in making this change and help to support them in actually making the change. So this slide gives us an opportunity to start to practice some of these skills. So using those kind of 4 main goals or principles of motivational interviewing, we want to engage, focus, evoke, and then start the planning phase. So engaging, it just involves starting the conversation with what brings you in today? What can I help with today? What is on your mind? Using those open-ended questions to allow the student to start to open up to you. Instead of just saying, hey, everything okay? Or do you need something right now? It can be easier to give them an open-ended question and feel like they have the opportunity to open up to you. Focusing helps you to start to identify more closely an issue or change that the student is having or considering making. So like Zach mentioned, it can be really hard to do this when your students have all of these different balls in the air, all of these different things going on, but you can kind of try to focus the conversation on what you think the major overarching issue might be. And this can also give the student an opportunity to correct you or talk more about what they really want to talk about. Why would you want to make this change? If you did decide to make this change, how might you go about it in order to be successful? Evoking gets the student to think out loud about the change and maybe even go through that process of talking themselves through it in a way that maybe they haven't before. It can be really hard to do on your own, and it can also be really hard to do when someone is just giving advice at you or telling you what to do. But when the student has the opportunity to really walk through those steps of what that might look like, what it might take, that can really be helpful in the process. So evoking can involve asking questions like, what are the 3 best reasons for you to do it? How important is it for you to make this change on a scale of 1 to 10? And one of the things that I sometimes find helpful is asking like, oh, why are you at an 8 instead of a 7? Or if they're at a 5 or 6, what do you think it would take to get you to an 8 or 9 in terms of readiness to change or importance to change? This can help you to see where a student is at in terms of their readiness to change, as well as what barriers they might be facing that are making it hard to make that change. You can summarize what you have heard and then ask, so what do you think you'll do? Or what action would you like to take? How do you think you'll proceed? And this agency to decide what they want to do and how they want to take those next steps. Finally, in the planning phase, this is the point where you want to restate their words back to them and then conclude with something like, I'm excited to hear how your plan works, or let me know how it goes, so that they know that they can come back to you for support as they're going along this phase or this planning. Is there anyone who would like to share a situation that they faced with a student or that they could imagine facing with a student and how they might be able to utilize some or all of these steps in that situation?
I'll jump in again to avoid the awkwardness. But I currently serve as a mentor for the One at a Time scholarship program with St. Vincent de Paul. And it's a regular one-on-one that I meet with my mentee, and having these questions or these outlines supports with what's the goal that we want to go into this meeting, what's our outcome, and so that we have a consistent talking point throughout the week, or even just what is that general check-in, because they're going through being a student during a pandemic, so getting those resources is helpful.
think too, for us as professionals who work with different students and for our students who are dealing with many different stressors in their lives, having some things that we can kind of go back to as areas of focus and as kind of like a structure for working through them can be really helpful for all of us in refocusing and really addressing the issues in a way that can be helpful to our students. So then you might be wondering, what can I do when I'm trying to work with my student on identifying an issue, evoking talk about behavior change, and I am just not hearing change talk? So some strategies that you can try when you are not hearing that desire, ability, reason, need type of change talk are trying to evoke more. So asking more open questions about what their desire might be, where their ability might be, or good reasons for change. So trying to keep those questions open-ended. How do you feel it might affect you to make this change? Do you feel, well, you want to keep it open-ended, but how do you feel that it's affecting your academic performance to stay up late at night socializing? Asking these questions that can start to get a little bit more to the students' desire to change, as well as address some of the barriers. What do you feel like you'd be missing out on if you didn't socialize with your fraternity? Things like that, that you can start to see where some of the barriers might really lie and help the student to better address those. Affirm and correct more. So reflect on statements that were leading to a need or desire and continue to affirm strengths, skills, or goals. So you hear your students saying, well, I'd like to do better in school, but I also have a lot going on with socializing, work, fitness, things like that. You could say, well, it sounds like you really have a lot of ability to balance a lot of different tasks. What would be the benefit to focusing more on academics or something like that, so that you're affirming everything that they're telling you as a positive about their skills. And I know that those of us who work with college students really like college students and think that there's so many great things that they are dealing with, they're balancing, that they're committed to. And so if we're knowing that one of our goals is to affirm, it's usually not hard to do so. Continuing to roll with resistance, summarizing out loud the conclusion that they sound as if they don't want to do anything about avoiding the problem or fixing the barrier to their goals, but without reaction or judgment. Because our students have their own sphere of control, I think that's always something that's worth addressing. Saying something like, well, it sounds like you have a lot going on right now and don't really feel ready to make a change. That can help your students solidify that, yeah, I don't really feel ready to make that change, or say, well, wait a minute, if this is really important to me, I can find a way to do so. So rather than having your student feel like you're battling them or you're not happy with them how they are, you're disappointed in them, it gives them the opportunity to reflect on the decisions that they are making, that they have agency over, and decide how they want to proceed from there, while knowing that you're going to be there as like a resource, as a support, regardless of what your student decides to do, can make it easier for them to come to you in the future.
Probably, we're kind of pressed against time here, so we can probably go past this one. Okay. So with skill building, like I said, we're kind of up against the clock here. We want to make sure everyone gets a nice break for the next sessions and everything like that. So awareness, what do I need to change? When do I direct rather than reflect? How often do I supply someone else's answer? And how comfortable am I letting something go when someone is resisting? This is all that comes in time, right? This is, if you're naturally good at this, great. I mean, incredible. A lot of this is a learned skill though. And so we need to keep practicing these and keep working on these and keep thinking of them. And there's always more learning to do. And so if you're looking for places you can safely try these new skills without, impacting a student because you want to make sure you got it down, there's three-way coaching, there's simulation, and we have a Canvas classroom at that bit.ly link. Jenna, do you know more about this bit.ly link than I do? So we can go ahead and share that.
I'll open that up and then share it.
Perfect, thank you. So there's always ongoing sessions. This is one of the resources we have. I'm going to open that, but also just larger community resources we have available. where can we direct our students towards? And at the bottom of this list, many of you may be familiar with some of these, maybe not all, maybe all of them. But at the bottom, this presentation was part of the ASU Wellness C3 program. And so you can always check out our C3 program at wellness.asu.edu and find more information there. Actually, I think, oh, no, wrong way. I think I can open this if everyone can see this. So that link takes you here. Oh, well, there you go. Thank you, Jenna. Post it in there. It takes you to this Google Doc where you can sign up for more interest for training sessions. Lots of different levels, lots of different sessions. You have previously attended a C3 training because of this. And so you could submit that, someone will get in contact you, and there's more ways to work on that. I believe there's also presentations for groups rather than individuals, so I think that's something that can be set up as well through wellness.asu.edu, the website. Perfect, thank you. And so that's one of the resources. So we really appreciate you all listening to us today, interacting with us. If you could, it would really help us out. Fill out this evaluation for us. Helps us just tailor the presentation a little bit. What are we missing? What are we doing well on? All that good stuff. But that's really it for us. Jenna, do you have anything else?
I think that's it. Thank you all so much for being here today in this afternoon session. And please feel free to stay on for questions if there's anything else that you want to clarify or talk about.
Thank you, Jenna and Zach.
Sorry.
You're welcome. Go for it.
I did have a question. Is the C3 training open to, for example, AmeriCorps volunteers that happen to serve with ASU, or is it strictly ASU staff?
Great question. I'm actually not sure the answer to that, but I will contact our C3 organizers and ask about that. My guess would be that they'd be happy to present this to any ASU affiliated group, but let me clarify on that and get back to you. Would you mind sending me your email address?
Yes, I'll put it into the chat.
Perfect, thank you. Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks again. Take care.
Take care. Have a good one.
Bye.
Yes. There you go.
I'm gonna end the recording.